I've lived long enough to know that grief doesn't stay buried. It waits, and sometimes, in the strangest places, with the strangest messengers, it walks right up and refuses to leave. I saw it happen once, on a dusty road in Tanzania, in the last light of day. The Land Rover's engine died. Grace Carter stepped onto cracked earth, dust coating her boots before she'd taken 3 steps. 3 years since she'd stood here. 3 years since the transport truck disappeared with him inside. Wind moved through golden grass. Then a sound. Low. Not a roar, a chuff. Her breath stopped. Through the heat, shimmer, something emerged. Massive. Maned. 400 pounds of muscle and scar tissue. Walking toward her with the patience of someone who had been waiting a very long time. The lion stopped 3 feet away. His eyes darker now. Older held hers. Then he lowered his great head and pressed it against her hip. The same gesture, the exact same weight. Her hand found his mane, rougher than she remembered. Fuller. You waited, she whispered. You actually waited. We'd love to know where you're watching from tonight. Drop us a comment and say hello. If these stories bring you a moment of peace, consider subscribing. It helps us keep sharing tales like this one, and we're grateful for everyone who joins us. 3 years earlier. Dry season. August. Nathan woke at 4:47 a.m., same time every morning. His body didn't know any other rhythm. Grace lay on her side of the cot, facing the canvas wall. He couldn't tell if she was sleeping or just not talking. Lately, it amounted to the same thing. He dressed in the dark, didn't touch her shoulder. The space between them had become a language he'd learned to speak fluently. Outside, the Serengeti stretched flat and gold under a sky just starting to bleed pink. The research station was quiet, a handful of canvas tents, 2 prefab buildings, a medical shelter where something always needed stitching. He walked to the clinic. A zebra mare waited on the table, gash on her flank, flies already circling. He pulled on gloves, examined the wound, began cleaning the tissue. The mare's eye rolled toward him. Wide. Afraid. He didn't look back. 20 years ago. The creek behind their house in Montana. Tommy's hand slipping from his grip. The water wasn't even that deep, but deep enough. Nathan's jaw tightened. He threaded the suture needle, focused on the wound, just the wound. Fix the body. Move on. 2 kilometers out. Grace knelt in the grass with her Nikon pressed to her face. A lioness nursed 3 cubs in the shade of an acacia. Fat, squirming bodies. Small mouths finding what they needed. Grace's finger hovered over the shutter. She didn't press it. Her hands were shaking again. They'd been doing that since the ultrasound room. Cold gel on her belly. The technician's face going still. I'm sorry. Mrs. Carter, there's no heartbeat. 5 months along. Far enough to feel him kick. Far enough to have picked a name. She lowered the camera. Sat back on her heels. The lioness looked up. Amber eyes meeting hers for a half-second before returning to her cubs. Grace watched them nurse. Watched the small bodies push and wriggle in demand. Something in her chest pulled tight, then went numb and went. She packed up her gear, started walking back. That evening, Nathan sat by the fire pit alone. Cold coffee in a tin mug. The stars were coming out, thick and indifferent. Grace had gone to bed early, again. Somewhere in the darkness, a hyena called, another answered. He stared at the coals until they stopped glowing. Tomorrow, They'd drive out to observation point Gamma. Routine survey, nothing special. But the wind shifted, carrying something he couldn't name, a restlessness, a pressure in the air, like the savannah was holding its breath. The Land Rover rattled over ruts, suspension groaning. Nathan kept his eyes on the dirt track. Grace sat in the passenger seat, camera in her lap, lens cap still on. Neither had spoken since they left observation point Gamma. 40 minutes of engine noise and dust. The silence had weight. It pressed against the windows, filled the space between seats. Nathan saw the vultures first. 6 of them, circling low against the afternoon sky. Lazy spirals. Patient. Something's dead up ahead. Grace glanced up, nodded once. Neither suggested stopping. Death was part of the job. That's what Frank Holloway always said. Nathan had started thinking in Frank's voice lately. The realization sat in his stomach like a stone. He pressed the accelerator. The vultures drifted behind them. They were about to round a bend when Grace's hand shot up. "Wait!" Nathan braked. The engine idled, ticking in the heat. "You hear that?" He killed the ignition, listened, wind in the grass. The creak of cooling metal, then a sound, high-pitched, weak, almost like a bird, but not quite, a mewling cry. Coming from the grass to the left, Grace's door was open before he could speak. She dropped into the golden stalks, wading through grass that reached her waist. The crying got louder, more urgent. Nathan grabbed the first aid kit from behind his seat, cursed under his breath, followed. The grass parted ahead of him, bent where Grace had already passed. The smell hit him: dust, dry vegetation, something metallic underneath. Old blood, maybe, baked in the sun. He found her kneeling in a small clearing. Her back was to him, her shoulders rigid. "Grace!" She didn't answer, didn't move. He stepped around her and saw it, a lion cub. Male, no bigger than a house cat. Ribs like a xylophone under dull, patchy fur, eyes crusted with discharge. The whole body trembling a constant. Fine vibration that seemed to come from somewhere deeper than muscle. The ground around him told a story Nathan could read: paw prints, large ones, leading away. Dark stains on the earth dried, cracked, old, drag marks that stopped abruptly, as if something had been lifted and carried. His mother. Gone. The cub saw them. His head lifted, wobbling on a neck too thin to support it. He should have run, should have hissed, swiped, bared his teeth. That was instinct. That was survival. He didn't. Too weak to run, too starved to fear, he took one step toward Grace. His back legs buckled, and he caught himself. Claws digging into dirt, kept coming. Another step, another stumble. When he reached her boot, he stopped, opened his mouth. The sound that came out wasn't a roar, wasn't a growl, it was a plea. Thin, desperate, the sound of something that had run out of hope and was asking anyway. Grace's knees hit the dirt. Her hands hovered over him, fingers spread, trembling. Nathan stood behind her, frozen. His brother's face flashed in his mind, small hands reaching. Water closing over. He shook it off, swallowed hard. The cub looked at him. Golden eyes, too big for that starving face, crusted at the corners but clear underneath. Watching. Waiting. He cried again. Quieter this time, like he was running out of strength even for that. "We can't leave him." Grace's voice was raw, scraped. She hadn't looked away from the cub. Nathan's jaw worked. Every nerve in his body screamed at him to turn around. Walk back to the truck. Don't get attached. Don't take responsibility for something so fragile, so likely to fail. He knew this feeling. He'd spent 20 years building walls against it. He's wild. The words came out flat, clinical. He belongs out here. He'll be dead by morning. That's— Don't! Grace turned. Her eyes were wet, red-rimmed, fierce. Don't say that's nature. Not today, not to me. The cub mewled again, a thin, wavering note that cut through the heat. Nathan looked at him, at the vultures still circling, visible above the grass, at his wife, kneeling in the dirt, holding herself together with nothing but stubbornness. He crouched down, extended his hand, palm up, fingers loose. The cub sniffed. His whiskers brushed Nathan's knuckles dry, feather light. Then, with what seemed like the last of his strength, he crawled forward, pressed his face into Nathan's palm. His whole body weight, maybe 8, 9 pounds, settled against that hand, and the warmth was shocking, feverish. Nathan's throat tightened. Tommy's hand, slipping, the cold water, the silence after, and he closed his eyes, opened them. Get the blanket from the truck. Grace was already moving. Her footsteps crashed through the grass, fast, urgent. Nathan stayed where he was. The cub's breathing was shallow, rapid. His heart hammered against his ribs. Nathan could feel it through his palm. Too fast, too desperate. But he was still breathing, still fighting. The sun was dropping toward the horizon. Shadows stretched long across the grass. The vultures banked, adjusted, kept circling. They could smell weakness. They were patient. Nathan shifted his hand, scooped the cub against his chest. The small body was lighter than it should have been, all bone and fever and trembling, but those eyes stayed fixed on his face, watching, trusting, something Nathan hadn't earned, something he wasn't sure he deserved. Grace came back, wool blanket bunched in her arms. She wrapped it around the cub without a word. Her hands were steady now, purposeful. They walked back to the Land Rover together. Nathan carried the cub. Grace carried the first aid kit. Neither spoke. When they reached the truck, Nathan climbed into the passenger seat. The cub cradled against his chest. Grace took the wheel. She started the engine. Put it in gear. The station's 20 minutes out, she said. I'll push it. Nathan nodded. The cub's eyes had closed. His breathing was evening out slightly. Still too fast, but less frantic. Grace pulled onto the track, accelerating hard. Dust billowed behind them. Nathan looked down at the small body in his arms, felt the heartbeat against his palm. He thought about the vultures, about the dried blood on the ground, about a mother who had vanished and a cub who had watched the trucks pass for how long, days, weeks, waiting for someone to stop. And then one question cut through everything else, sharp and cold. What if they couldn't save him? The medical tent smelled like antiseptic and old canvas. Nathan worked under a single hanging bulb, its light harsh and yellow. The cub lay on the examination table, wrapped in the wool blanket. His eyes were half closed. His breathing came in short, rapid bursts. Nathan pulled on fresh gloves, assessed the damage. Dehydration sphere, fever high, maybe 104, 105. Ticks embedded across the neck, behind the ears, in the soft folds of the belly. He counted as he worked. 37. Each one plucked with tweezers, dropped into a jar of alcohol. The cub whimpered, but didn't fight. Too weak. Or maybe he understood that the pain now meant survival later. Grace sat on a wooden stool beside the table. She held the cub's head in her lap, stroking the matted fur behind his ears. Her fingers moved in slow, steady circles. She was humming. A melody Nathan didn't recognize. Something old. Maybe. Something from before. He inserted the IV line, subcutaneous fluids, the easiest route for a patient this small. The cub flinched when the needle went in, then settled. His eyes found Grace's face and stayed there. Hours passed. Nathan lost track of time. He checked vitals, adjusted fluids, cleaned the crusted discharge from the cub's eyes. Around midnight, He poured himself cold coffee from a thermos, drank it standing up. Grace didn't move, didn't speak, just kept humming, kept stroking. At 3 a.m., the cub's breathing changed, slower, deeper. His trembling eased. His eyes closed fully for the first time since they'd found him. He slept. Grace's head drooped, her hand stilled on his fur, within minutes. She was asleep too, the cub curled against her chest, her chin resting on top of his head. Nathan sat on the floor beside them, his back against the tent pole, his legs stretched out, boots dusty, laces loose. He watched them breathe, the cub's small ribs rising and falling. Grace's shoulders finally relaxed, the tension she'd carried for months draining away in sleep. Something moved behind his ribs. He didn't have a name for it. He'd spent 20 years avoiding names for things like this. He stayed awake until dawn. Day 2. Frank Holloway's Land Cruiser pulled into the station at 9 a.m. sharp. Nathan saw him coming through the medical tent's open flap. Pressed khakis, clean boots, the look of a man who wrote checks and expected results. Frank stepped inside. His eyes found the cub immediately. His face went flat. "This isn't a rescue shelter. Dr. Carter." Nathan straightened. The words he'd prepared, clinical, defensible, came out sounding hollow. He was abandoned. Wouldn't have survived the night. Standard intervention protocol for... "There's no protocol for this." Frank cut him off. "We're a research station. Observation, documentation, not intervention." He stepped closer, looking down at the cub with something between disgust and pity. "Nature takes its course. That's the job." Grace stood up from her stool. She'd been silent until now, watching from the corner. Her hands shook, not from cold. She hadn't slept more than 3 hours. "He followed us." Frank turned. "Excuse me." The cub, her voice was low, steady, the kind of quiet that made people lean in. He should have run, should have hidden. That's instinct. That's what every manual says a wild cub would do. She stepped forward. Her eyes didn't waver. Instead, he walked toward us, kept walking until he collapsed at my feet. A wild animal, choosing humans over death. She paused. "You want data, Mr. Holloway. That's data." Frank stared at her. His jaw worked. A voice came from the doorway. 2 weeks. Dr. Walter Okonkwo stood at the entrance, arms crossed. He'd been listening. His face gave nothing away. "Give them 2 weeks," he continued. "If the cub survives, we discuss next steps. If he doesn't..." He didn't finish. He didn't need to. Frank looked between them. Nathan, standing rigid by the table. Grace, chin raised, hands steady despite the trembling. Walter, blocking the doorway with the quiet authority of a man who'd been here longer than any of them. His jaw tightened. 2 weeks, not a day more. He left without another word. His boots crunched on gravel, fading toward the main building. Walter looked at Nathan, said nothing, nodded once. Then he was gone too, that night. Nathan and Grace sat outside their tent. The fire pit crackled low. Stars scattered across the sky, thick and silent. The cub slept in a crate between them. He'd gained 1/2 pound already. His breathing was steady, even. Grace spoke first. "Why did you say yes?" Nathan stared at the flames. "What do you mean? You never..." She trailed off. They both knew what she meant. He never got attached, never bent the rules, never let anything close enough to matter. He was quiet for a long time. The fire popped. A log shifted. "He looked at me like I could save him." Grace waited. "No one's looked at me like that since..." He stopped. His throat closed around the name, Tommy. His brother, 12 years old, reaching up from the water. He couldn't say it. Not yet. maybe not ever, but Grace understood. She reached over and took his hand. Her fingers were warm, calloused from camera straps and field work. He didn't pull away. The cub stirred in his crate, made a small sound, half purr, half sigh. His paws twitched, chasing something in a dream. They both looked down at him. 2 weeks, Nathan said. Let's just get through 2 weeks. Grace nodded. Her thumb traced circles on the back of his hand. The fire burned low. The stars wheeled overhead. Somewhere in the darkness, a lion roared distant, territorial, unconcerned with the small drama unfolding at the edge of his kingdom. Nathan listened to the sound fade, felt Grace's hand in his, felt the strange, fragile weight of something beginning. 2 weeks, but what would happen when those 2 weeks were over? Day 4. The cub spiked a fever. Nathan watched the thermometer climb 104.2, 104.6, 104.9. He adjusted the IV fluids, added antibiotics to the regimen, soaked towels in cool water, and draped them across the small body. The cub's breathing turned shallow, rapid. His eyes rolled back, showing white. Grace sat beside the table, her hand on his flank, feeling each struggling breath. She hadn't slept in 36 hours. Her hands shook not from cold. Neither had Nathan. "Come on," she whispered. "Come on." The night stretched. The fever climbed, peaked at 105.3 around 2 a.m. Then, slowly, it began to drop. By dawn, the cub was breathing easier. His eyes focused again, finding Grace's face, holding there. Nathan checked vitals. Pulse steadier, temperature down to 103.1. "He's fighting," he said. Grace nodded. Her eyes were red-rimmed, her hair matted with sweat, but her hand stayed on the cub's flank, steady and warm. Day 8. First solid food. Nathan mixed formula with minced meat, a slurry that smelled like iron and milk. The cub sniffed it, nose twitching, then dove in. He ate so fast he choked, coughed. Bits of meat sprayed across the table. Grace laughed. The sound startled Nathan. He hadn't heard it in months. Maybe longer. The cub finished the bowl, licked it clean, then looked up with meat smeared across his whiskers. His tail twitched, once, twice. He pounced on Grace's dangling braid. She yelped, pulled back. The cub held on, claws tangled in her hair, growling with mock ferocity. Nathan laughed, a real laugh, from somewhere deep in his chest. Grace looked at him. Her eyes widened, slightly surprise. Maybe, or recognition of something she'd forgotten existed. The cub released her braid and tumbled backward, legs splaying. He righted himself, shook his head, and immediately pounced again. Day 14. The 2-week deadline. Frank Holloway returned at 9 a.m., stood in the doorway of the medical tent. Watched the cub, now 22 pounds, eyes clear, fur filling in chase a ball of twine across the floor. His face was unreadable. "He survived," he said. "He did?" Nathan stood by the examination table, arms crossed. Frank watched the cub a moment longer. The small body tumbled, rolled, sprang up again, tail high, ears forward. "The board will want a plan. Rehabilitation, timeline for release. We're working on it." Frank nodded once, turned to leave, paused at the door. "Don't get attached. Dr. Carter. It never ends well." He was gone before Nathan could respond. Week 3. The cub started following Grace everywhere. When she walked to the mess tent, he trotted behind her, mewling if she moved too fast. When she sat to review field notes, he curled at her feet, chin resting on her boot. When she stood, he stood. When she stopped, he stopped. Nathan watched from the medical tent. He'd seen this before imprinting. The cub had fixed on Grace as his primary caregiver, his mother, in every way that mattered to a 10-week-old lion. "He thinks you're his pride," Nathan said one evening. Grace was sitting outside their tent, the cub sprawled across her lap. He was getting too big for this 28 pounds now, legs dangling awkwardly, but he didn't seem to notice. "I know," she said. Her hand stroked his head, slow, steady circles behind the ears. The cub's eyes were half closed, a low rumble building in his chest. That night, he slept between them on the cot, his body warm and solid, taking up more space than seemed possible. Nathan woke at 3 a.m. to find Grace crying. Silent tears, sliding down her temples into her hair. The cub was pressed against her belly, purring in his sleep. Nathan didn't ask, he just shifted closer and put his arm around them both. Week 6. Dr. Walter Okonkwo called them to his office. The room was small, cluttered with papers and field guides. A map of the Serengeti covered one wall, marked with colored pins lion territories, migration patterns, research sites. Walter sat behind his desk. His face was calm, but his eyes held something heavy. "He's thriving," Walter said, "which means we need to talk about what comes next." Grace's shoulders tightened. Nathan saw it, the slight pulling back, the hands clasping in her lap. "He needs to learn to be a lion," Walter continued. "Hunting, territory, social behavior, things we can't teach him." "He's 12 weeks old," Grace said. "He's not ready. He's 16 weeks past when he should have started learning from his mother." Walter's voice was gentle but firm. "Every day he spends with us, he becomes less capable of surviving on his own. So we just throw him out there, let him starve." "No, we transition him. Rehabilitation center. Experts who know how to experts." Grace's voice cracked. "He doesn't need experts. He needs—" She stopped, her jaw clenched. Nathan stepped in. "Walter's right." The words tasted like ash. "We're not his pride, but we can't give him what he needs long term." Grace turned on him. Her eyes blazed. "So we just abandon him like everyone abandons everything." The words hit like a slap. They both knew she wasn't talking about the lion. Nathan's throat tightened. He wanted to explain about Tommy, about the water, about 20 years of keeping everything at arm's length because losing something you loved was worse than never having it. But the words wouldn't come. He walked out. The tent flap snapped behind him. That night, he slept in the medical tent, alone. The cot felt too big, too cold. He stared at the canvas ceiling and listened to the sounds of the station settling into darkness. Somewhere, he heard the cub crying, pacing, looking for him. He didn't go back. Dawn, gray light filtered through the canvas. Nathan walked to their tent. His boots felt heavy on the packed earth. He pushed through the flap, stopped. Grace was asleep on the cot, still in yesterday's clothes. The cub was curled in her arms, head tucked under her chin. Tear tracks dried on her cheeks. On his fur, too, she'd been crying into his mane. Nathan knelt beside the cot. His knees hit the ground, hard. "I'm not leaving him," he said quietly. "I'm not leaving you." Grace's eyes opened. Red-rimmed, exhausted, wary. "Then why did you walk out?" "Because I'm scared." She waited. "I don't know how to love something I might lose," he swallowed. "So I keep it far away, and then I lose it anyway." The words hung in the air. The cub stirred, blinking up at Nathan with sleepy golden eyes. Grace sat up slowly. The cub grumbled at the movement but stayed pressed against her. "I blamed myself," she said. "For the babies, both times. I thought you blamed me too." Nathan's chest constricted. "I never—" His voice broke. "I never blamed you. I blamed myself for not knowing what to say, for not being enough." She reached out, took his hand. We're both terrible at this." He almost laughed. Almost. "Yeah. We are." The cub wedged himself between them, purring. His body vibrated with it, a deep, steady rumble that Nathan could feel through his chest. They sat there as the light grew stronger, not speaking, just breathing. Something had shifted. Something small, but real. But outside the tent, Nathan heard footsteps approaching, heavy boots on gravel, more than one person. Then Frank Holloway's voice, sharp and official. "Dr. Carter, the board has made a decision." Frank Holloway stood in the main hall with two men Nathan didn't recognize. They wore pressed shirts and carried leather folders. Board members. The kind of people who made decisions from conference rooms 1,000 miles away. "The cub transfers to the Naivasha Rehabilitation Facility in 3 days," Frank said. His voice was flat, rehearsed. "They'll assess him for eventual release. If that's not viable, he'll be placed in a managed sanctuary." Nathan stepped forward. "He's not ready. He's bonded to us. The trauma of separation at this stage could what, Dr. Carter?" Frank's eyes were cold. "Kill him. He's a lion. They're resilient. He's 5 months old. He's imprinted on you." "Yes, that's exactly the problem." Frank closed his folder. "Your emotional attachment has compromised this situation from day one. This is science, not sentiment." Grace stood up from the bench where she'd been sitting. Her hands were shaking, but her voice came out steady. "You've never looked into his eyes. You don't know what he survived out there, how many days he waited, how he chose us over dying alone." She stepped closer. "He's not a subject in your research log. He's a life." Frank looked at her. Something flickered across his face. Pity, maybe, or contempt. "Then you're in the wrong profession. Mrs. Carter." Dr. Okonkwo cleared his throat. "Perhaps we could discuss a phased transition. Give them time to— The decision is final." Frank tucked the folder under his arm. "Transport arrives Thursday at 0600. I suggest you use the remaining time to prepare him, and yourselves." He walked out. The board members followed without a word. The hall went quiet. Nathan could hear his own heartbeat, could feel Grace's hand find his, her fingers cold and tight. Walter looked at them both. His face held no comfort, only the weariness of a man who'd seen this before. "I'm sorry," he said. "I tried." The night before, Nathan sat outside their tent. The cub sprawled at his feet. 65 pounds now, paws the size of Nathan's palm, the first fuzz of a mane darkening around his neck. He didn't know what was coming. He batted at a rope toy, pouncing, missing, pouncing again. Each time he caught it, he looked back at Nathan for approval, tail high, eyes bright. Grace sat beside them, her knees pulled to her chest. She hadn't stopped crying for hours. The tears came silently now, tracking down her cheeks, dripping off her jaw. Nathan put his arm around her. His own eyes burned, but he held it back. One of them had to stay upright. "Maybe it's better this way," he said. The words felt hollow. "He'll have space. Other lions eventually. A real life." Grace shook her head. "Or maybe he'll spend his whole life wondering why we left." The cub abandoned his toy. He climbed into Grace's lap, too big for it now, legs dangling awkwardly, and pressed his face against her neck. His body was warm, solid, vibrating with a low purr. Then he made that sound, the chuff, soft and trusting, the sound lions make only for family. Nathan's throat closed. He reached out, rested his hand on the cub's shoulder, felt the heartbeat under his palm, strong, steady, unaware. "I know, buddy." His voice cracked. "I know." The cub chuffed again, settled deeper into Grace's arms, closed his eyes. They stayed like that until the stars wheeled overhead and the fire burned down to coals. No one moved. No one spoke. There was nothing left to say. Dawn. Gray light. The sound of engines. Nathan stood outside the medical tent, watching the transport vehicle pull into the station. White, unmarked. A metal crate visible through the back window. 2 handlers climbed out. Khaki uniforms, thick gloves. They moved with the efficiency of men who did this often. The cub was at Grace's feet, pressed against her legs. His ears were flat, his body low to the ground. He'd never seen this vehicle before, but he knew something was wrong. The handlers approached. One of them reached for the cub. He bolted, ran behind Grace, crying high, panicked sounds that cut through the morning air. His claws dug into the dirt. His whole body trembled. "Easy," the handler said. "Just need to get him in the cub swiped, not hard, not to hurt, just fear, pure and overwhelming." Frank's voice came from behind Nathan. "Sedate him. We don't have time for this." Nathan stepped forward. "Let me do it." Frank hesitated, then nodded. Nathan walked to the cub, knelt in front of him, those golden eyes wide now, terrified, locked onto his face. "Hey." Nathan kept his voice low, steady. "Hey, buddy, it's okay." The cub whimpered, pressed closer to Grace's legs. Nathan reached into his pocket. The syringe was small, the dose carefully measured, just enough to make him sleep, just enough to make this easier. Easier for who? He pushed the thought away. "I'm sorry." His voice came out rough, broken. "I'm so sorry." He slid the needle in, gentle. The cub flinched, then stilled. His eyes found Nathan's face again, held there. No accusation, no betrayal, just trust, complete and unearned. The sedative worked fast. The cub's eyes fluttered. His body swayed. He leaned into Nathan's hand the same way he had that first day, in the grass, when he was small enough to fit in one palm. He went down softly. Nathan caught him, held him. The handlers moved in, lifted him, carried him to the crate. The metal door closed with a sound that would live in Nathan's memory for years. A clang, final, absolute. Grace stood frozen. Her face was blank, empty in a way that frightened Nathan more than tears would have. The engine started. The vehicle pulled forward, tires crunching on gravel. Nathan watched it go. The dust rose behind it, thick and golden in the morning light. The crate was visible through the rear window, a dark shape inside, motionless. The vehicle rounded the bend, disappeared. Grace didn't move, didn't speak, just stood there, staring at the empty road. Nathan walked to her, took her hand. Her fingers were cold, limp. He squeezed. She didn't squeeze back. The station was quiet. The dust settled. Somewhere, a bird called. Nathan looked at his wife, at the road where the vehicle had been, at the empty space where the cub had slept for 3 months. He thought about the crate, the handlers, the facility in Kenya where experts would assess and evaluate and decide. And one question surfaced. Cold and heavy. Would the cub ever stop looking for them? The days after the transport were hollow. Grace stopped going into the field. She sat in their tent, holding the wool blanket that still carried his scent. It was fading each day a little more, and she couldn't bring herself to wash it. Couldn't bring herself not to. Nathan worked 18-hour shifts, treated injuries he didn't remember treating, filed reports he didn't remember writing. He ate when someone put food in front of him, slept when his body gave out. They shared a cot, but didn't touch. The space the cub had filled was still there, a warm, purring absence that neither knew how to close. Dr. Okonkwo tried. He invited them to dinner, suggested counseling through the Foundation's health program, left notes under their tent flap with phone numbers and gentle reminders. They declined. Politely at first, then not politely at all. The fragile bridge they'd built was collapsing. They both felt it, planks falling away beneath their feet, the gap widening with each silent meal. Each turned back, each night spent pretending to sleep. 1 month later. Nairobi. The Wildlife Conservation Conference filled the Kenyatta International Convention Center with researchers, donors, and journalists. Nathan was scheduled to present a paper on large carnivore veterinary protocols. Routine, professional, safe. He stood at the podium. Slides projected behind him, laser pointer in hand. The room held maybe 200 people, faces he recognized, colleagues he'd worked with for years. He got through the first 15 minutes without incident. Data, statistics, case studies. His voice was steady. His hands were still. Then came the Q&A. A hand went up near the back. A man Nathan didn't recognize, young, sharp-faced, wearing the kind of smile that preceded cruelty. "Dr. Carter, could you address the ethical considerations of anthropomorphic attachment in field veterinary practice?" The man's voice carried easily. "I understand there was an incident involving a lion cub at your station. Some colleagues have suggested your judgment was compromised." Whispers rippled through the room. A few raised eyebrows. Someone near the middle coughed or laughed. Nathan couldn't tell. His throat tightened. He gripped the podium edge. The situation was complex. The cub was adopted. Another voice, from the left. More whispers now. Less subtle. Domesticated, given a name and tucked into bed at night. Heat climbed Nathan's neck. His collar felt too tight. The slide behind him, a chart showing recovery rates, suddenly seemed absurd, irrelevant. The intervention followed established protocols for what protocols? The sharp-faced man again, leaning forward now. "I've reviewed the literature, Dr. Carter. There's nothing that recommends taking a wild predator into your personal quarters, sleeping with it, treating it like a, that's not what happened." But his voice cracked on the last word. He heard it. They all heard it. Someone in the back snorted. "Emotional attachment compromises scientific integrity. That's undergraduate material. Basic stuff." The whispers spread. Nathan stood at the podium, hands white-knuckled, face burning. His mind went blank. The words he needed, the defense, the explanation. The context, all of it dissolved like smoke. He opened his mouth, closed it. The room waited. The silence stretched. 200 people watching him drown. He walked off the stage. His legs carried him through the side door, down a corridor, past a water fountain he didn't see. His shoes squeaked on the polished floor. His breath came fast and shallow. He found a bench in an empty hallway. Sat down, stared at the floor. Grace was in the audience, 3rd row, left side. She'd watched the whole thing, watched his hands shake, watched his voice break, watched him retreat like a wounded animal. She found him 20 minutes later. Neither spoke. The conference noise filtered through the walls, applause, laughter, the hum of people who hadn't just been publicly dismantled. That night, in their hotel room. Grace started packing. Nathan sat on the edge of the bed. His tie hung loose. His jacket was crumpled on the floor where he'd dropped it. "I can't do this anymore." He looked up. Her suitcase was open on the desk, half her clothes already inside. "Grace, we're destroying each other." She didn't turn around. Her voice was flat, exhausted. "Can't you feel it every day? A little more, we're drowning. And we keep pulling each other under. So you're leaving. I'm surviving." She closed the suitcase, zipped it. The sound was final. "Maybe you should try it." He wanted to fight. Wanted to say something that would make her stay, make her see that they could still fix this, still find their way back. But the words from the conference hall echoed in his head. The whispers, the contempt, The look on her face when he walked past. He'd failed in front of everyone. Failed publicly, spectacularly, with witnesses who would spread the story across 3 continents by week's end. "Maybe you're right," he said. She paused at the door, her hand on the handle, her back to him. For a moment, he thought she might turn around. She didn't. The door clicked shut behind her. 6 months later. Montana. Nathan worked at a rural veterinary clinic outside Bozeman. Horses, cattle, the occasional farm dog with a broken leg, nothing wild, nothing that reminded him. His apartment had 3 rooms. He used 2. The third held boxes he never opened. He ate standing up at the kitchen counter, microwaved meals in plastic trays. He didn't taste them, didn't care, didn't. At night, he lay on a mattress on the floor he'd never bothered buying a bed frame and stared at the ceiling until sleep came. Sometimes it didn't come at all. The clinic's receptionist, a woman named Dorothy with gray hair and kind eyes, brought him casseroles on Thursdays. He thanked her, ate them alone, put the clean dishes on the porch for her to collect. He didn't call Grace. She didn't call him. The divorce papers arrived in October, plain envelope, return address in Oregon. He signed them at the kitchen counter, standing up, and mailed them back the same day. One night, he couldn't sleep. He walked to the third room, opened one of the boxes. The cub's collar was on top. Canvas, worn. The Sharpie letters faded, but still legible. Carter Station. Cub 1. They'd made it for him in the early days too small now. Left behind when they transferred him, Nathan had kept it. He didn't know why. He held it, turned it over in his hands. Tommy's face flashed in his mind. Then the Cubs, then Grace's. The night she walked out, he sat on the floor of the empty room, holding the collar, and cried, really cried, for the first time since Tommy. Since the water? Since he was 12 years old and his brother's hand slipped from his and he couldn't do anything but watch. He cried until his chest ached, until his eyes swelled shut, until there was nothing left. Then he sat in the silence and wondered if this was all there would ever be. Meanwhile, Oregon. Grace lived with her sister in a small house outside Eugene. She taught biology at a community college introductory courses. Nothing that mattered. The students were polite. The work was easy. She did it because it filled hours. At night, she dreamed of golden grass, of a small voice crying, of amber eyes watching the road, waiting for a vehicle that never came. She woke, reaching for something that wasn't there. A warm body. A steady purr. She didn't call Nathan. The silence between them had hardened into something permanent. 18 months passed. The seasons changed. Snow fell and melted. Summer burned hot and faded. Grace stopped dreaming about the cub, or maybe she just stopped remembering her dreams. Either way, the nights got easier, emptier, but easier. Then, on a Tuesday morning in March, her phone rang. She didn't recognize the number. International. A long string of digits. She almost didn't answer, but something made her pick up. Some instinct she couldn't name. Mrs. Carter. The voice was older, accented, familiar. "This is Dr. Okonkwo, from Serengeti." Her heart stopped. "I have news about your lion." The phone rang at 3:17 a.m. Nathan reached for it on instinct. His hand found the nightstand, knocked over an empty glass, grabbed the phone on the second try. "Hello, Nathan." The voice cut through 18 months of silence. Older, heavier, but unmistakable. "Walter, I apologize for the hour. It's midday here. I forgot about the time difference." A pause. Static crackled on the line. "I have news about the lion." Nathan sat up. The room was dark, cold. His heart hammered against his ribs. What happened? The rehabilitation center released him 18 months ago. They assessed him as a strong candidate for rewilding, put him in a protected territory near the old station. Since then, our researchers have been tracking his movements. Nathan's throat tightened. And he survived. More than survived. He's a dominant male now, has his own territory. 3 females in his coalition. The words took a moment to register. Survived, dominant, his own territory. He made it, Nathan said. The words came out rough. He made it. Another pause, longer this time. But there's something else. Something I think you need to see for yourself. What is it? The researchers observing him, they've noticed a pattern. Every evening, around sunset, he returns to the old road, the one where you found him. He sits there, watches the vehicles pass. Nathan couldn't breathe. It's not hunting behavior, not territorial patrol. He just watches. The researchers have never seen anything like it. The way he tracks each vehicle, the way his ears move. Walter paused. They think he's looking for someone. The silence stretched. Nathan could hear his own pulse in his ears, could feel the weight of the phone against his palm. "Come back," Walter said, "and bring Grace." Nathan called her the next morning. First conversation in 18 months. He dialed the number 3 times before he let it ring. His hands were shaking. His mouth was dry. She picked up on the 4th ring. Nathan. Her voice was the same. A little tired, maybe. A little distant, but the same. "I got a call from Walter," he said. No preamble, no small talk. He didn't know how to do that anymore. "About the cub?" Silence. "He's alive." "Grace." "He's wild. He has his own territory." He heard her breath catch. A small sound. Almost imperceptible. "He made it. He made it." Nathan swallowed. "But there's more. Walter says he comes back to that road every evening, watching the trucks, like he's looking for, he couldn't finish." Grace didn't speak for a long time. Nathan listened to the static. Waited. "I need to think about it," she said finally. His chest tightened. "Grace, I'll call you back." The line went dead. He sat in his kitchen for 2 hours, staring at the phone, waiting. When it rang, he answered before the first ring finished. "I'll meet you in Nairobi," she said. Her voice was different now, steadier. Like she'd made a decision and was committed to seeing it through. "Grace, are you sure? After everything, I'm sure." A pause. "I need to see him. I need to know." 3 days later, they sat side by side on a plane bound for Kenya. The seats were narrow, their elbows touched on the armrest. Neither pulled away. Grace stared out the window. Clouds stretched below them, white and endless. "I don't know if I can do this," she said. Nathan looked at her, really looked. The lines around her eyes were deeper now. Her hair was shorter. She looked tired, worn. But she was here. She'd come. "Me neither," he said. "Then why are we doing it?" And he thought about the question, about the empty apartment in Montana, about the collar in the box, about 18 months of silence that had felt like drowning. "Because I don't want to spend the rest of my life wondering." She turned from the window. Her eyes met his. "Yeah," she said quietly. "Me neither." The Serengeti hadn't changed. Golden grass stretched to the horizon. Acacia trees dotted the plain. The sky was impossibly wide, impossibly blue. The research station had new buildings, new faces. But the bones were the same: the medical tent, the fire pit, the road that led out to the observation points. Dr. Okonkwo met them at the gate. His hair was grayer now, his shoulders slightly stooped, but his eyes were the same, seeing everything, saying little. "Tomorrow," he said. "Early. I'll take you to his territory." That night, Nathan and Grace sat by the fire pit. The same stones, the same smell of wood smoke and dust. She spoke first. "I blamed you. After I left." She stared into the flames. "It was easier than blaming myself." Nathan nodded. "I know. I did the same thing. We were both wrong. Yeah." The fire popped, sparks rose and vanished. "I signed the papers," she said. "The divorce papers. I signed them and mailed them back the same day you did." Nathan looked at her. "I know. I thought it would feel like closing a door, like ending something." She shook her head. "It didn't feel like anything, just empty." He understood. He'd felt the same thing standing at his kitchen counter, pen in hand, waiting for some sense of finality that never came. "Maybe that's where we start," she said, "from empty, and see if we can find something else." He didn't answer with words. He just reached over and took her hand. Her fingers were cold, thin, but they closed around his and held on. The fire burned low. Tomorrow, they would face the lion before they went to sleep. Grace found Walter in his office. "The researchers who've been observing him," she said. "What do they call him?" Walter looked up from his desk. His expression shifted, something soft moving behind his eyes. "He came with a name," he said. "From the intake records at the rehabilitation center. Someone wrote it on his file the night you brought him in." He reached into a drawer, pulled out a folder, worn at the edges, yellowed with age. He handed it to Grace. She opened it, read the intake form. Her eyes found the line marked identification and stopped. The name was written in faded ink, handwriting she didn't recognize, but the word solace. Her breath caught. She remembered now, the first night. Nathan asleep on the floor of the medical tent, exhausted. The cub pressed against her chest, small and feverish and fighting for every breath. She'd whispered to him, told him he was safe, told him he wasn't alone anymore. And somewhere in that long, desperate night, she'd given him a name. "Maybe you're here to save us." She'd said it out loud. She hadn't realized anyone was listening, but someone had heard. Someone had written it down. And now, 3 years later, it was the only name he had. Grace closed the folder. Her hands were trembling. "Thank you," she said. Walter nodded. His eyes glistened in the lamplight. "Get some rest," he said. "Tomorrow will be a long day." Dawn came gray and cool. Nathan woke with Grace's hand still in his. They'd fallen asleep by the fire, wrapped in blankets, shoulder to shoulder. He sat up slowly. His back ached. His neck was stiff, but something else was different, a lightness he hadn't felt in years. Grace stirred beside him, opened her eyes. "Today," she said. "Today?" They ate breakfast in silence, drank bitter coffee from tin mugs, watched the sun climb over the horizon, turning the grass from gray to gold. Walter pulled up in a Land Rover at 7 a.m. "His territory is about an hour out," he said. "Near the old observation point, the one you used to work from." Nathan climbed into the back. Grace took the passenger seat. The engine rumbled to life. They drove. The landscape scrolled past, familiar and strange at once. Nathan recognized certain copias, certain bends in the road, but everything seemed different now. Sharper, more vivid. Or maybe he was just seeing it clearly for the first time. Walter stopped the vehicle at a rocky outcropping. Boulders stacked by ancient forces, surrounded by open grass. "From here, you walk," he said. "He knows engines, but he needs to see you." Nathan and Grace stepped out. The grass brushed their legs. The air smelled like dust and heat and something wild. They walked toward the copia, hand in hand. The sun was climbing. Shadows shortened. A hawk circled overhead, Riding thermals, they reached the base of the rocks. Stopped. What if he doesn't remember? Grace's voice was barely a whisper. Nathan squeezed her hand. Then we came anyway. That matters. They waited. Minutes passed. The sun rose higher. Heat shimmered off the plain. Nothing moved. Grace's grip tightened. Nathan felt doubt creeping in, cold and familiar. Maybe Walter was wrong. Maybe the watching was just instinct, not memory. Maybe 3 years was too long for any creature to remember. Then movement in the grass. A shape. Large, moving slow. Gold against gold. Nathan's heart stopped. The shape emerged from the tall grass. Massive. Maned. 400 pounds of muscle and scar tissue. Solace. He stopped 20 feet away. His eyes darker now. Older found them, and held. For a long, terrible moment. Nothing moved. Then he took a step forward. Solace walked toward them. Not charging, not threatening. Just walking. Slow, deliberate. The gait of an animal who had made a decision and saw no reason to rush. Nathan's legs locked. Every instinct screamed at him to back away 400 pounds of apex predator closing the distance. Amber eyes fixed on his face. But his feet stayed planted. His hand stayed in Grace's. Solace stopped 10 feet away. His nostrils flared, testing the air, taking in their scent, sweat, dust, something foreign. American soap, airplane, coffee from the station. His ears rotated forward, then back, then forward again. For a long, suspended moment, nothing moved. The wind died, the grass stilled. Even the insects went quiet. Grace's heart pounded so hard she could feel it in her fingertips, in the roots of her teeth. This wasn't the cub she remembered. This was a wild animal, a killer. 3 years of survival had written themselves across his body, the scar on his left shoulder, the notch in his ear, the way his muscles coiled beneath his hide like springs waiting to release. He could end them both in seconds. He knew it. They knew it. Solace's head tilted. The same tilt he used to do when he was small and curious, when everything was new and worth investigating. Then he chuffed. The sound cut through the tension like a blade. Low, soft, a vocalization Grace hadn't heard in 3 years but recognized instantly. The sound lions make for family. Her knees gave out. She dropped to the grass. Not a choice, but a collapse. Her legs simply refusing to hold her weight anymore. The golden stalks scratched her palms. Dust rose around her. Solace watched. His posture shifted, the predator tension draining from his shoulders, his head lowering slightly. He took another step, then another. He stopped 3 feet from where she knelt. Grace couldn't breathe. Couldn't move. Could only look up at this creature who had once fit in her arms, who had once pressed his fevered body against her chest and fought for every breath. Solace lowered his great head and pressed it against her shoulder. The weight was enormous, warm, real. His mane brushed her face coarser than she remembered, thicker, carrying the smell of grass and dust and something wild she couldn't name. He chuffed again. Right against her ear. The vibration traveled through her skull, down her spine. Her hand found his mane, shaking. She buried her fingers in the rough fur, felt the heat of him, the steady pulse of blood beneath the skin. You waited. The words came out broken, barely a whisper. You actually waited. Solace rumbled. Deep in his chest, a sound that wasn't quite a purr, but close enough. He stayed there, head against her shoulder, for what felt like hours. Grace's tears soaked into his mane. She didn't try to stop them. Then he pulled back, turned. Nathan stood frozen where she'd left him. His face was pale. His hands hung at his sides. Fingers twitching, Solace walked toward him. Nathan didn't move, didn't breathe, just watched those amber eyes approach, watched the massive paws compress the grass, watched the muscles shift beneath the golden hide. Solace stopped in front of him. His head was level with Nathan's chest. His breath was warm and damp, carrying the smell of meat and grass and something ancient. For a long moment, they just looked at each other. Then Solace bumped his head against Nathan's sternum, hard enough to make Nathan stagger backward, boots skidding in the dirt, but not hard enough to hurt. The same clumsy affection, the same gesture he'd made when he was small enough to fit in Nathan's lap, just bigger now, much bigger. Nathan's hand found the thick fur of his neck. He could feel the heartbeat beneath his palm, strong, steady, unafraid. "Hey, buddy." His voice cracked on the second word. He didn't care. Solace rumbled again, leaned into the touch. They stayed until the stars came out. Solace lay in the grass nearby, not between them. Not on them, but close. 10 feet away. The distance of a wild animal who trusted but hadn't forgotten what he was. His great body rose and fell with each breath. His eyes were half closed, watching the darkness, watching them. The sun dropped below the horizon. The sky turned orange, then purple, then black. Stars emerged thick and bright, more than Nathan had ever seen in Montana. Grace sat with her knees pulled to her chest, Nathan beside her, their shoulders touching. Neither spoke. There was nothing to say. The moon rose. Silver light spilled across the plain. Solace stirred, his head lifted, his ears rotated toward a sound Nathan couldn't hear. Then it came distant, carried on the wind, a lioness calling, low and resonant. Solace rose to his feet, shook himself once, dust flying from his mane. He looked at Grace. Then at Nathan. His eyes held something Nathan couldn't quite name. Not gratitude that was too human, not farewell that was too final. Something else, something older. Recognition, acknowledgement. The look of an animal who knew exactly who they were and what they had done for him. He turned, walked toward the darkness. His golden form merged with the shadows. The grass parted and closed around him, swallowing him whole. He didn't look back. Grace watched until she couldn't see him anymore, until there was nothing but starlight and wind and the distant sound of lions calling across the plain. "He's gone," she said. Nathan took her hand. "He'll be back, tomorrow evening, same place." "How do you know?" "Because that's what he does. Walter said so. Every evening, same spot." He squeezed her fingers. "He's not leaving. He's just living." She nodded. Her throat was tight. They walked back toward the Land Rover. The grass whispered against their legs. The night sounds rose around them, insects, distant hyenas. The wind through acacia branches. Grace spoke first. "You think he'll be okay? He's wild, strong, has his own territory, his own pride." Nathan paused. "He made it. But he still comes back to that road." "Yeah." Nathan's voice was soft. "He still comes back." They reached the vehicle, stood beside it, looking back at the dark plain. "I want to come back," Grace said. "Next year and the year after." Nathan nodded. "So do I." She leaned into him. He put his arm around her shoulders. "We should go," she said. Where? She thought about it. The house in Oregon, the apartment in Montana, the places they'd tried to build lives in, separately, unsuccessfully, none of them felt like home. "Wherever you are," she said finally. "That's where—" He didn't answer, just held her tighter. They climbed into the Land Rover. Nathan took the driver's seat. The engine rumbled to life. The road unwound beneath them, familiar and strange. The same ruts and the same bends, and the same place where they'd heard a crying sound 3 years ago, and everything had changed. Grace fell asleep against his shoulder, her breathing slow, even, peaceful, Nathan drove on. The headlights carved a tunnel through the darkness. Ahead, the station lights glowed warm and yellow. Above them, the African sky stretched wide and endless. Somewhere behind them, a lion roared. Not in challenge, not in warning, just letting the world know he was there. Nathan smiled, the first real smile in longer than he could remember. They'd come back for a lion. They'd found something else instead. There's a quiet that settles after a story like this. Not empty, just still. The kind that sits in the chest and doesn't ask to be named or explained. Some of us know what it means to wait, to sit by a window, a phone, a road that stretches toward someone who may never come back. Many of us have loved something that couldn't say thank you, a child who grew distant, a friend who faded, a piece of ourselves we set down somewhere and never retrieved. We carried that love quietly, without recognition, without applause. And perhaps that was enough. Perhaps it always was. You don't need to do anything with what you felt tonight. It doesn't need a name or a frame or a resolution. Some things are allowed to simply rest tender and unfinished in the space between one breath and the next. The lion returned to his road. The couple found their way back to each other. And somewhere in the Serengeti, the grass still whispers the same way it always has. It's all right to let it be. Thank you for staying until the end. Thank you for listening.